In early 2025, a disturbing video began to spread online. At first, it appeared like countless other shocking clips that find their way into the endless scroll of social media. A young marine trainer named Jessica Radcliffe, just 23 years old, stood on the edge of a tank at a place called Pacific Blue Marine Park. She waved to the crowd with a bright smile, her hand brushing against the surface of the water. Below her, a massive black and white shape circled, slicing through the shimmering blue. The crowd leaned forward, expectant. A moment later, the water erupted. The orca lunged, its enormous mouth closing around Jessica's arm, dragging her into the depths. The surface churned violently, the audience screamed, and then, nothing. The clip ended abruptly, frozen in silence. The video was visceral, almost too much to take in. Within hours, it spread across TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Reaction channels dissected every frame. News-style narrations claimed that the orca, a male named Cairo, had fatally attacked Jessica during a live performance. Comments poured in by the thousands. Grief-stricken strangers offering condolences. Angry animal rights activists calling for the closure of marine parks, and curious onlookers wondering how such a tragedy could happen in an age of strict safety protocols. It felt real because it mimicked so many real tragedies we've seen before. But there was a problem. No major news outlet carried the story. No obituary for Jessica Radcliffe could be found. The supposed Pacific Blue Marine Park didn't exist anywhere in the world. Slowly, questions began to surface. When experts examined the footage, the flaws emerged. The voice narrating the event was strangely flat, perfectly measured, lacking the natural fluctuations of human speech. It was the voice of an artificial intelligence. Jessica's movements looked just slightly unnatural, almost too fluid in some moments, stiff in others, as if generated by a computer. The way the sunlight glinted off the water looked off. The ripples bent in strange ways, not quite matching the orca's movement. Even the crowd noise had an uncanny loop, with the same distant laugh repeating every few seconds. The truth became unavoidable. The video was fake. Jessica Radcliffe had never existed. The tragedy had never happened. This was not a flawed report or a misunderstanding. It was a synthetic tragedy, designed from the ground up to look real, to feel real, to provoke the same emotions as reality. And yet it spread faster than many true events. That's because it tapped into something we already believed could happen. It didn't need to convince us that orcas can be dangerous in captivity. History had already done that. The hoax simply borrowed from the archives of our collective memory. For decades, killer whales have lived in a strange space in human imagination. To some, they are majestic, intelligent symbols of freedom. To others, they are unpredictable predators, capable of turning deadly without warning. Indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest revered them, telling stories of orcas as guardians, as protectors of the ocean who could guide lost canoes home or rescue humans from drowning. But to European sailors of the 18th and 19th centuries, these massive black and white predators were dangerous beasts. Given the name whale killers, later flipped to killer whales, even though there were no confirmed records of wild orcas killing humans. Everything changed in the 1960s when humans decided to capture them. In those early years, marine parks like SeaWorld and Marineland saw orcas as living attractions, a blend of novelty and spectacle. The capture process was brutal. Helicopters and speedboats driving pods into coves, calves separated from their mothers with explosives and nets, adults thrashing in panic as their young were taken away. Many died during capture. Some never made it to the parks at all. The first orca ever held in captivity, a female named Wanda, died after just 2 days. But that didn't stop the industry. SeaWorld and similar parks built entire shows around the image of harmony between trainer and whale. Trainers rode on their backs, stood on their noses as they surged out of the water, dove together in choreographed routines. The audience believed in the partnership. The trainers believed in it, too. But captivity is not the ocean. In the wild, orcas travel up to 100 miles a day, hunt with sophisticated strategies, and live in complex social groups that can last their entire lives. In tanks, they swim in circles, eat dead fish instead of hunting live prey, and sometimes lash out in frustration or confusion. And that's when the real tragedies happened. In 1991, at Sealand of the Pacific in British Columbia, 20-year-old marine biology student Keltie Byrne slipped into a pool containing 3 orcas, Haida 2, Nootka 4, and Tilikum, a massive male who would later become infamous. The whales repeatedly pulled her under, preventing her from reaching the surface. Trainers tried desperately to help her, but they couldn't get her free. She drowned in front of witnesses in 2009 at Lora Park in Tenerife, Spain. A trainer named Alexis Martinez was working with Quito, a young male orca. The day before Christmas, during a routine session, Quito rammed him with such force that his ribs and sternum were crushed. He died from his injuries, and in 2010, one of the most high-profile tragedies occurred at SeaWorld Orlando. Dawn Broncho, a senior trainer with years of experience, was pulled underwater by Tilikum. Witnesses described how quickly it happened. One moment she was standing at the pool's edge, the next she was in the water, the orca holding her in a grip she could not escape. The cause of death was drowning and blunt force trauma. These events were real. They left grieving families and shocked communities. They sparked protests, lawsuits, documentaries, and worldwide debates about whether orcas should ever be kept in captivity. And it's because of those real stories that the fake story of Jessica Radcliffe worked so well. It didn't need to invent a new kind of tragedy. It simply cloned the template of a tragedy we already recognized. But the Jessica video was also something new, a warning sign of how far technology has come. This wasn't an old-fashioned hoax with actors and staged sets. It was crafted entirely with artificial intelligence, a voice cloned from samples of news anchors, a face generated from fragments of real people who never consented to be part of a lie, movements created with motion capture data layered over water effects rendered in real time, crowd sounds stolen from actual events, stitched into a loop to sound authentic. This is the world we live in now, where one person with a decent computer can create a tragedy from nothing and make it convincing enough to fool millions. Psychologists have a name for why these fakes work so well: the affect heuristic. It's our brain's tendency to let emotion override logic. When we see something that makes us feel, whether it's horror, anger, or sadness, we are less likely to question it. Add to that the algorithms of social media, which reward content that provokes strong emotions, and you have a perfect environment for synthetic tragedies to thrive. The danger isn't just that people will believe fake stories. The deeper danger is that repeated exposure to fakes will make people doubt the real ones. If every tragedy might be fabricated, how do we know which ones are worth caring about? That doubt corrodes our ability to respond to real suffering with urgency and empathy. Jessica Radcliffe never lived. She never trained an orca. She never died in front of a screaming crowd. She is a phantom, a construct of code and pixels. But Keltie Byrne lived. Alexis Martinez lived. Dawn Broncho lived. Their stories are true. Their families still carry the loss. In the past, we could trust our eyes. A photograph was evidence. A recording was proof. But now, truth is something we have to fight for. We have to ask questions. Who made this? Why? Can it be verified? In a world where tragedies can be manufactured on demand, truth itself is under attack. Not every story we see deserves our belief, but the truth, the real truth, is still out there. It is still worth finding, and it is still worth defending. All right, here's the extended version in simple, flowing English, no headings, no bullet points, just a smooth narration you can read as a storyteller. In the early days of marine parks, orcas were seen as beautiful and friendly giants. People would travel from far away just to watch them jump out of the water, splash the crowds, and perform tricks with their trainers. The bond between human and whale seemed magical, almost like something out of a dream. Trainers would kiss them, ride on their backs, and even let them push them through the water at incredible speed. On the surface, it all looked perfect. But behind the shows, there were moments that told a different story. A story of stress, frustration, and unpredictable behavior. In the 1960s and 1970s, orcas were being captured from the wild and placed in tanks that were far smaller than the vast oceans they once roamed. At first, people didn't realize how intelligent and emotional these creatures were. Trainers worked closely with them, spending long hours together. Most days were calm, but sometimes, without warning, an orca would refuse to perform, or it would behave in ways that made trainers uneasy. There were moments when a whale would grab a trainer's foot and hold them underwater for a few seconds before letting go, almost as if testing boundaries. These incidents didn't make the news very often, but among trainers, they were remembered. Sometimes, the whales would block a trainer's path to the poolside, keeping them in the water until someone distracted them. Other times, a whale would push a trainer harder than usual during a stunt, making it clear that it was not just playing. Trainers would laugh it off in front of the audience, but behind the scenes, they knew these were warning signs. By the late 1980s, a few serious close calls had happened in different marine parks around the world. In one case, a whale refused to release a trainer for several minutes, causing panic among the staff. In another, an orca struck a trainer with its tail, knocking them off balance and into the water unexpectedly. These moments reminded everyone that no matter how well trained an animal seemed, it was still a powerful predator with a mind of its own. There was also growing pressure on the whales themselves. Life in a tank was nothing like life in the wild. In the ocean, orcas swam up to 100 miles a day, hunted in coordinated groups, and interacted with their families. In captivity, they were kept in small spaces, made to perform several shows a day, and were often paired with whales from different pods that didn't get along. This sometimes led to fights between the whales, and trainers could sense the tension. The relationship between humans and orcas had always been built on trust, but that trust was fragile. Every time a whale acted aggressively, even for a moment, it chipped away at the feeling of safety. Trainers knew they were working with animals that could end their lives in seconds if they wanted to. Still, the shows continued, and the risks were rarely talked about outside the marine park world. Then, in the winter of 1991, the unthinkable happened. Keltie Byrne, a young and talented trainer, was working at Sealand of the Pacific in British Columbia. She was experienced, confident, and loved by her colleagues. That day, while performing her duties, she slipped and fell into the Orca pool. 3 whales were in the water, Tilikum Haida 2 and Noochka 4. At first, it might have seemed like a routine accident, something that could be fixed by quickly getting her out, but instead, the whales began to play with her in a way that quickly turned deadly. Keltie tried to reach the edge of the pool, but the whales kept pulling her back into the water. They dragged her under, preventing her from coming up for air. Trainers and staff rushed to help, throwing ropes and trying to distract the whales. But it was too late. The animals were in control, and they were not letting her go. The rescue attempts went on desperately, but Keltie never resurfaced alive. She drowned in front of her co-workers and visitors. It was the first time in recorded history that an orca had killed a trainer. The incident shocked the marine park industry and the public. For those who had worked with orcas for years, it confirmed something they had feared but never wanted to believe, that no matter how much love, trust, and training there was, these animals could still turn dangerous without warning. After Keltie's death, people began to look back at all the close calls and aggressive moments that had been dismissed over the years. They realized that the signs had been there all along. The playful grabs, the sudden refusals to perform, the blocking of trainers in the water. These were not harmless quirks. They were warnings, and in 1991, those warnings became reality in the most tragic way. If you want, I can double this length again by adding more emotional build-up about each pre-1991 incident, including trainer testimonies and orca behavior details, so it becomes a full 15 to 20-minute narration for your video. That would make it much more gripping for your audience.